Welcome to another episode of the Ground Control Branching Out podcast. I'm Neil Bailey, your humble host, and in this episode we are talking to Peter Brown. Yes, the weather guy himself. Let's find out all about the weather and whether he does indeed live in front of a green screen. So let's get straight to it. So, Peter, welcome to the podcast. It's really good to have you on an episode. So if you would, for me, just introduce yourself. So who are you and what do you do?
Hi, morning, Neil. I am Peter Brown. I am the winter maintenance decision maker and commercial operations manager.
Okay, that took a bit of thinking to get those words out there.
It's quite complicated and it's quite new. So it's something we've been working on for a few months. But the decision maker bit is the newest part. Commercial operations manager is something I've been doing for good couple of years, interested in and responsible for the commercial service that we offer our customers within winter.
Okay, so with that really snappy job title, what do you actually do then? What does that mean?
So it's a great question. What I actually do is, the kind of two parts, that the easiest part, I guess, to explain is the newest part. And that is that I am responsible for the weather data that drives our winter maintenance service, and that being gritting and snow clearance.
Right.
And we take data from two different forecasters, which we've expanded from. So for about 15, 20 years, we only had one forecaster. A couple of years ago, we expanded that to two for resilience planning and things like that. Yep. We take those data sets, we put them through our system, which does all of the kind of clever, automated stuff. And then I take that data and look at it in a more kind of human detail and aspect, and just to see whether or not things need to be overridden, whether there's snowfall that's occurred where we haven't generated gritting visits. That could be a concern for our customers. Looking at trends and patterns in the weather so that we can plan, our field teams, whether they know when to make their own resilience and ordering salt, things like that, making sure we've got enough people on the phones, making sure customer services are kind of packed and making sure they're ready to take the queries that come in from customers. So just the whole kind of from a holistic point of view, when severe weather occurs, it can affect lots of different parts of our business. And my role is to help gather those all together, give them all the data they need, and then also look at the weather data that's coming in. So it's quite interesting. And it's relatively new. Like I say, I went on a course a couple of months back with the Institute of Highways Engineers, which is a company that runs the training program for councils within winter maintenance. Yeah. And I think I'm one of the first or only commercial businesses that have gone through that similar sort of training program. It's really fascinating and interesting. And we're looking to kind of how we can expand our service, how we can improve it, because it's mostly, like I say, driven by data. And that can be quite boring. But the result of that is obviously a real risk and human effect of our service delivery on the ground, and making sure that there is a human eye and looking at all of that data that comes in. So that's one part. And the other part is the commercial side. So that's making sure, we're actually making some money and we're not losing, which is important. We don't need to be in it to make millions and millions of pounds, but we certainly want to ensure that we're not losing. Our customers are paying a fair price. Our teams are being paid a fair price. Working with the operations director, Jay Hicks, to make sure that all works well. Our cost base is kind of fair and correct, looking at things like RPI and the kind of movement of financial data as well, and how that affects our service delivery, and having a kind of contact, I guess, with customer service for the customer contact part of the job, and also the regional managers who look after and are responsible for managing our field teams. So it's a real, I guess it's like the glue really that kind of combines all parts of our team together.
So RPI?
So that's where it's every year when you look at kind of the a number of items across the country. So it can be things like food, gas, energy, things like that. The costs change every year, and making sure that there's an appropriate amount to take into account things like fuel and labour increases and things like that to make sure that we have a fair cost base, which is really important to us.
Yeah. So a question that jumps out to me around the training and this angling being, the GC weatherman, as you've been sold on the on LinkedIn, etc., is why you? Is it something you've been interested in, or were you in the wrong or right place at the right time?
That's a really great question. Why me? Yeah, I've always been quite fascinated by the weather,
right?
And I've got and we'll probably get to it. My kind of history in joining ground control, the start of which was quite interesting and is well known within the business.
Okay, we can come back to that.
So we can come back to that. And I guess the real kind of fascination working within a winter maintenance team, obviously someone's got to have an interest in the weather, and it just became a sort of, I'd casually look at a few different websites and I'd watch a few videos and I'd kind of teach myself and train myself how, what all the terminologies mean and what it all kind of, how it affects our weather in the UK. And then looking at kind of wider weather patterns, and I just gained, I guess, an accumulative interest over the years. And I've been here for now, I joined on the 4th of December 2010, and that's really important. So I've been here a good kind of almost 15 years. So yeah, it's just been a cumulative interest in how and the weather obviously not just shapes winter. It's clearly very important for winter, but it's also plays a role in other parts of our business too. So things like wind affecting the trees, there's a kind of interest there. So, and I think weather is becoming more of a player within how we use that data within our services and many different services. But people just have kind of grown to call me the weather guy. I mean, I used to explain myself when talking to customers, because commercial operations manager is a bit kind of boring. I'd always kind of be given the weather guy title. So, and it's just kind of stuck.
Yeah. So I'm interested about then kind of what was covered on the training. I'm assuming it was a little bit more than all stood with one foot on a field gate, checking which direction the cows were facing, that kind of stuff. So obviously you were saying this about data. So was a lot of it about data analysis? What did you cover?
It was interesting. It was kind of it, because from the kind of plot that was kind of sent to us and the initial kind of status or the title of a decision maker training, right, I was kind of fascinated to see what it really was all about. When it came down to it, I guess it was in sort of 2 or 3 parts. One was understanding the weather and getting more of an overview on meteorological, training connected to the data that the Met Office use and also other providers too, wider kind of knowledge connected to that, and also more to do with if I were to be let's say a council depot operator and responsible for the resource. So in ground control, we're lucky we have a number of people that kind of technically split up a decision maker role, and it's kind of more connected to a local business where you would be responsible for making sure that you had the resource in place and that you had the salt ordered in time and that you had all of that stuff. So as I was saying earlier on, the work that I do anyway is more of a conversational bringing people together. I think at a council level, it's much more operational led and you do that work yourself. So you would call in people and you would ensure that there were more people being brought in to run the vehicles, that you had enough salt ordered and you do that yourself. Whereas at ground control we have a number of different people that do that role. So but it was interesting because of the different ways, I guess, that, and also the similar ways that it works for council running the similar service to us. And that is things like they make an adjustment on the application of salt that they use on their roads depending on the conditions. And you might think that makes total sense. Whereas we have, and we've always had I think it's the same for most commercial service operators, is that we use the kind of council detail, but then we improve on that so that we don't have the adjusted application rates, but we do make kind of adjustments based on severe weather conditions. So when there is a period, as there was a couple of weeks ago, where it was considerably colder, -9, -8, in double figures, in fact, some nights, that you're putting more than you need to down when gritting the site. Whereas if you were just putting the data into the system, that might just generate a standard level of salt application. So they kind of take that data and they make adjustments in their system. They take the data and they kind of ensure that there's a resource there. So there are definite similarities, but it's much more of a one person managing everything at council level than one person just liaising with different departments as we do in our team.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fascinating training course. The bit I was most fascinated about, I guess, and most interested in was just getting more weather knowledge, because that helps my understanding of the data we're getting, but also thinking about how we can take some of the learnings and having great conversations with people in the industry too. It was a great opportunity to kind of connect with other operators from councils and learn from the things that they experienced. Lots of shared similarities between us all. How we experience Beast from the East, there was lots of kind of conversations about that, and also just kind of being one of the only commercial people there as well, just kind of making that contact and explaining things in a different way, which made them also think too. And it was a great opportunity for us all.
Yeah, I suppose a couple of more detailed bits around the weather bit, and then a little bit broader. So a couple of bits jump out that my head is thinking, oh, I want to know a bit more about that. So you said about that you're generally using two sources of data now, did you say?
That's right. Yeah.
Is that two sources of data and it's kind of merged, or do you use one to kind of validate the other? How are you using
exactly that? Right. No, that is exactly right. We get two sources of data. We merge them so that they kind of look and feel the same in the system, if that makes sense, because some different data sets look differently. And then the secondary data kind of provides us with that backup. So we take the worst case scenario of those two data sets. So in cases where potentially one data set might prioritize a dry road state condition and the other may not, we would then just err on the side of caution, because it's far better when it comes to kind of, you're not playing with people's lives, but certainly the service that we provide to our customers has a real human impact at the source, and making a 1 and a 0 decision is very different to there being ice on the floor and somebody's life being changed forever. So we do take it really seriously, as you should in this business. Yeah. And it's, for example, it's far different to other parts and other services that we provide our customers, where if you don't, let's say, cut the grass one day, it's not going to have a major effect the next. Whereas gritting clearly is a kind of blue light service effectively, because we're making that kind of critical decision to make sure that people are safe as soon as those conditions occur on site. And having that data creates that additional resilience and backup in those situations.
And as a weather guy in this decision maker bit, my head is envisaging, people all over the country waiting for the red telephone to ring because Peter says go. How often are you doing this? Is this a daily kind of decision? How constant is it?
So I guess it kind of depends. So we rely on the data that comes in quite a lot, and in a kind of, let's say, a standard or a mild weather condition of the UK, which we're kind of in at the moment. It's been mild and windy and quite wet. We kind of don't need to do as much of it in interrogation, because there wouldn't be that. It will be clearly mild. Therefore, we're not really going to be doing a whole lot of gritting. In the situations where we've had severe weather and you get that kind of build up that leads into severe weather, it doesn't always kind of go, or it doesn't very often go from really mild straight into very cold, back into very mild again. So you end up with that kind of camel's hump, as we kind of call it, where you end up with a tail in and a tail out. In those cases, you might end up with moderate conditions where there is dry, there is minus road surface temperatures, and there is that risk where a point of a degree here or there could end up with there being frost or ice on the ground. So in those situations, that's where my kind of eye really is lent in those places. But also when we've had super severe weather, because the weather forecast doesn't look back, it's not historical. So if you end up with a lot of snow, as we had a couple of weeks ago in Scotland, and then no snow the next day, the forecast will assume that the road state has gone back to a neutral state again, when quite clearly when it's really cold, there may still be snow on the ground, which then causes runoff and causes the moisture, which
Yes.
then causes the ice to occur.
Yeah.
However, from a meteorological standpoint, the road surface state would be called dry because there's not been any additional moisture that had fallen during the day. And therefore, just utilizing that data that comes in, it might not trigger the service. So that's where it's really key and critical for us to kind of take those data sets and make the observation and the adjustment.
Yeah. So as a human being, which I'm assuming you are, unless it's very, very good AI, does it feel a lot of pressure sometimes? Does it feel pressure on your shoulders to be making those kind of decisions?
Yeah, I guess it does. It's not something that, I mean, it's definitely something that I take seriously, sure, because that's why I do the job. But it's not something that I tend to, it doesn't make me lose sleep at night, let me put it that way. And I think I would be in the wrong role if that was, something that happened, because it would clearly, I would never sleep if you kind of take the data sets and think, I'm responsible for 9,000 sites, potentially 9,500, potentially 23,000 people that might come into contact with that of a night time, maybe even more in retail parks. You could kind of really lose a lot of sleep over it.
Yes.
But I take the job and the role seriously, but I know when to trust the data. And a forecast is just that. I mean, we have conversations with customers all the time. It is literally, it's not a guarantee. Things can change. Clouds clear, frost can occur when not forecasted.
Yes.
You could end up with wind that's not quite as harsh as being forecasted, which means that the roads don't dry. So you might still end up with a moist or a wet surface. And that's just kind of the nature of the weather. I think our ability to forecast has clearly improved over the last kind of 20 years. Being lucky enough to kind of go to the Met Office and see their supercomputer, it is incredible. Wow. It's a massive room of kind of servers and whirring and chillers and everything. It's astonishing. And when you kind of think of technology and how it's improved since I was at school, kind of 35-40 years ago now, gosh, we've got more data in our mobile phones than there were to run a computer in space. So it's astonishing, the rate of change. And I think you do kind of look at that role that you play and making sure that customers are safe, making sure that your team understand what's going on. Because part of my other job, I guess, is also to explain the weather internally. And I like the way that it can kind of make people interested, because we love talking about the weather, right? The Brits, we love it. It kind of generates more conversations than most things. We're always talking about how wet it is or how hot we are.
Most video calls, let's face it, start with that, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a human kind of joy, I guess, really, because communication is kind of the fundamental driver, and we say that, I think that quite a lot in ground control. Good communication equals great service, and that's kind of definitely true within winter. So yeah, I don't lose sleep at night, but it's certainly something I take seriously.
Yeah, interesting. And obviously I can't not go back to it. You teed it up slightly about how you joined GC and got started. So go on then, give us it.
So this is in ground control folklore. I've told this story probably 100 times. So I will, for those that haven't heard it, and there will be plenty that have, and I apologize. For those that haven't heard it, this is what happened. So I used to work for a fantastic charity, UNICEF, and was a telemarketing manager. And through what happens with charities, that I was made redundant. Yeah. And I went on, and it just happened around kind of October. And I thought I'd get a nice couple of months off and I'd relax over Christmas, and then I'd start looking for a new job. My sister-in-law, who wasn't my sister-in-law at the time, but I was engaged to my now wife, she was working for ground control. Right. And she said, it's really busy. We've had a really kind of busy winter. There's service sheets everywhere, which is kind of the old style completion sheets. Mm-hmm. And we need someone to just scan them in, send them on, do all of the kind of admin stuff. So I was like, great. I'm happy to do that. I'll help out, no problem. She said, come in and meet the director, a couple of directors. We had Kim and Simon. And they'll kind of tell you all about it. You can have a chat and everything else. I was like, fine, great. So I was, on the day that I had an interview, it had snowed in the country, and and it had been snowing actually for all week. in 2010. And there was a kind of I was babysitting my niece. I remember the day so super well. I was babysitting my niece. I went out with her during the day. I slipped over in the road, hit my head on the ground. It was just like one of those days, right?
Yeah.
I had an interview at 5 o'clock. I drove into Billericay. We were at the old barn office, which for those of us that have been here long enough, remember that place. Parked up the car, had a chat, and Kim was the first person that saw me. And Kim, for those of you that ever get interviewed by Kim, she doesn't do the kind of standard interview questions. Mm-hmm. We chatted about musical theatre. We chatted about acting. We chatted about, because I've got kind of a bit of a history in that. That's one of my hobbies. I knew somebody who was in Wicked, and we were talking about Wicked. She loves Wicked. We were talking about all of that. And then 45 minutes to an hour went by. She said, "Oh, I better introduce you to my husband. And Simon, this is Peter. You know, have a chat." Da, da, da. So off she went home, and then he was clearly, I think the office was kind of pretty silent. As it turned out, the Christmas party that had due to be on that day had been cancelled because of the snow. Everyone was kind of in a little bit of a sad mood, let's put it that way. And there were most of the office kind of cleared out. At the time, which I didn't realise, they were also looking for a night shift manager. And ultimately, he had assumed I'd come in for the night shift manager role. And when I was handed over to him, he was like, "Right, okay, so this is the system. This is Mark. He'll show you how to get into ICE 2. This is what you do. You kind of hit that, you do that, you press that button, you go into that screen." And I was thinking, sure, this is fine. I can kind of pick all of that up later. He was like, "Okay, here are 2 guys. They're here now. I'm just going to get you to kind of sit with them, listen on the call. You can kind of understand what's going on. You might get some calls from teams when there's a vehicle breakdown. You do this, you call that number, blah, blah, blah." And he then went home. And I'm thinking, this is weird, but okay, I'm just going to go with it. I'm a nice guy. I'll kind of help out. So I carried on helping out. As it turned out, I stayed until 2 a.m. thinking, talking it through now, I sound so completely stupid. But I didn't query it. I didn't question anything. There were calls coming in. It was super busy. There were like lots of teams ringing up, having vehicle breakdowns or what have you. And I was just helping out the guys. And then when I picked up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, Kim was on the end, and I answered, and she went, "Oh my God, what are you still doing?" I said, "Well, like Simon showed me around, and I sat here and I took some calls." She was like, "Oh," and then she was talking to Simon in the background because he was calling all night as well, telling me what's happened to this customer. Has this site been done? What's happened to that team? Have they got a new wheel sorted out yet? And she then said, "Why have you kept him there?" She was like, "He's the new night shift manager." She went, "No, he's not. He's coming in to do some temping." So as it turned out, she said, "Look, let's just start all over again. Come in Monday at 9 o'clock. I'll show you the ropes. You can kind of start from scratch." And I came in on that Monday. I went home to my wife and I said to her, "Do you know when it feels like everything's happening at you and you have no control over what's going on, or you're on like You've Been Framed or one of those kind of funny shows?" I was like, I swear that's what it felt like. And everything was just, I was looking like, where is the camera? What is going on here? But I went in on Monday and I basically never left. So it can't be that bad, right?
Or you're just a sucker for punishment, you know.
Or I am a sucker for punishment.
Yeah,
which could be said too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so it's time for the final question, the extra question.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I've had this one in my back pocket for a while, and it just felt very serendipitous that I'm talking to you. So if your job was a weather forecast, what would the forecast be?
Oh, what a question that is. Wowzers. I guess it would be changeable. It would be, you'd have one of those days where you get all seasons in one day. You'd end up being really cold. There'd be some wind. It would absolutely tip it down for a time. And there would definitely be some snow. Yeah.
I love that. Really good talk to you, Peter. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Neil.
And there you have it. Another great episode. That was Peter Brown, the weather guy. Thanks for listening. Please do subscribe, like, share, spread that word. And until next time, take care.